Well, hello everybody. Welcome to our NOCD workshop today on harm OCD, and also happy Mental Health Awareness Month. Not that we only want to be aware of it 1 month, but this is a month when we are extra aware. Anyway, we are here today to talk about harm OCD, some different ways that it can show up for people, what evidence-based treatment looks like for harm OCD. And so that's what we're going to do today. I'm going to say something like an icebreaker. I'm not great at icebreakers, so I'm gonna throw out an icebreaker. If you would like to, in the chat, maybe say where you're from and what your favorite season of the year is. How about that? I'm actually originally born and raised in California, and a few years ago, I moved to Maine. And my favorite season is winter. Very wintry kind of a person. So, ooh, lots of people from all over the place. Looks like fall is winning right now, if there was a winning. Oh, somebody says, what does your shirt say? I would love to tell you that. My shirt says, ask me about my superpowers. ERP. Oh, it's a fun no CD shirt. Oh, I have a fellow winter lover out there. Gotta love winter. My reasoning behind that is when you are hot and sweaty, it's really difficult to become unhot and sweaty. However, when you are cold, you can just put on more things and become warm. See what I'm saying here? So if I haven't changed your mind, that's okay. You may love other seasons as well. My least favorite season is summer, where you become hot and sweaty. All right, so thank you so much for those um, um, little pieces of information about everybody. And let's get started. So I'm Tracie Ibrahim, for those of us who have not met. I am a therapist with NOCD. I have been with NOCD for a few years now, actually. And I am both a therapist and also the Chief Compliance Officer. One of the reasons why I love doing these kinds of workshops is because I myself have OCD. I've been having OCD forever, since I've been alive. I'm probably had it. But I remember things now that I know were OCD from as far back as about 4 years old. And I sort of had all the typical things that people know is OCD, that nobody noticed because it was all going on in my head. And later on in life, right around 10 years old, harm OCD showed up, at which point nobody knew I had OCD, let alone harm OCD, and people didn't even know what harm OCD was, so nobody knew that I had it. And that is why I like to talk a lot about the more taboo themes of OCD. Fun fact, Dr. McGrath nicknamed me Taboo Tracie one day because I was always like, let's talk about that. Let's talk about the taboo thing. Can I talk about the taboo thing? I want to talk about the taboo thing. Why? Because I was mistreated, misdiagnosed, all of the things that are bad that happen to people who have OCD and who don't get the right treatment and right diagnoses. And I don't want that to happen to other people. So I'm a huge advocate for getting out what things really are so people don't have to suffer alone. Um, my harm OCD first showed up, like I said, around age 10. It was actually, I was 10. And it came in the form of suicidal OCD. And who knew? Um, I didn't know. The people who evaluated me did not know. So they put me in a hospital, and I stayed in the hospital for many, many months. And that turned into many, many years. And when I was 12, I started also experiencing homicidal OCD. Both of suicidal and homicidal OCD fall under the harm OCD umbrella. Pretty much anything that is harm can fall under the general umbrella of harm. So even pedophilic OCD, right? That's I might cause harm to somebody who's underage. So that can also fall under harm. It can be about harming animals. It can be about harming loved ones. It can be about harming yourself. Just basically, if there's harm, it goes under that umbrella. Um, it's terrifying for people to have any type of OCD, let alone harm OCD, and not know that that's what it is. So when I was 10 and I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to kill myself, but I don't want to. That was terrifying. And when you go to a hospital and people are telling you that's what you want to do, that's what's happening, it's even more terrifying because those people are saying that what you're thinking is true, which was not true. They just didn't know how to ask me all the right questions to find out I did not want to die. That's just what my thoughts were saying. And later on, as I moved into homicidal OCD, of course, I was terrified. I thought I'm going to attack. At the first person who it came after was my father. And so I thought I was going to harm him in various ways. It later turned into I was going to harm animals, various animals that I have. To this day, I still have all of those themes. They're just very well managed now. I'll give you an example. I have a very adorable cat. We cuddle every single night, and she just curls up, and she's so precious. And when she lifts her little head, so I'll scratch her neck, OCD's like, you're going to choke her out and break her neck. So that's the sort of unpleasantness, I guess we'll call, of having OCD, especially when it's saying you're going to harm people, harm yourself, harm your animals, all these things. But once you get the right treatment, you can actually do something about it. So whereas I used to not want, like, I wouldn't let our dog in my room because when I was a kid, because I was like, I don't want to accidentally or purposefully, harm my dog. I would try and hide in my room and hope that my dad wouldn't come in because if he came in, I was afraid I was going to kill him. So, those are terrifying things that people have to sit with who have OCD, and it's not fair and it's not reasonable. But the fact is that unfortunately, um, a lot of people do not know what OCD really is. A lot of that is the media depicting it as a cute and adorable, quirky little personality thing where we all have neat and tidy homes. And maybe we check our lock a couple of too many times. And sure, that is OCD. And it's not cute and adorable for people who have to keep things, an insane level of clean either. That's not cute and adorable. It's not a preference, it feels like it's a forced thing you have to do. One of the most exhausting themes I've ever had and still have, although it's no longer exhausting, is my contamination OCD. I used to do so many compulsions that were physically and mentally exhausting. Um, that I mean, it's just beyond, thinking that it was an awesome thing to have. It is possible to learn how to manage OCD. All OCD is exactly the same. It just shows up in different flavors. So we treat all OCD themes exactly the same using the gold standard treatment of ERP. So the only difference is that ERP content that we are dealing with will shift with whatever theme you have going on. So, for instance, maybe you're having harm intrusive thoughts. Well, we are not going to try to erase those thoughts because that's not possible. We're not going to try to have different thoughts because that's not possible. We're not going to try to neutralize those thoughts or by doing a positive thought or anything like that, because we don't control our thoughts. That's one of the first things you learn in ERP is thoughts are going to happen. And also, the OCD doesn't just stop at intrusive thoughts, which a lot of people know who have OCD. Get intrusive thoughts, you get intrusive images, you can get intrusive feelings in your body, intrusive urges. One of my harm OCD intrusive urges can happen, for instance, um, when I'm in hotels. I love to be as high up as possible. I just love being up high. And every time I request a high floor room, and without fail, I look out the window and OCD is like, you are going to throw a chair through the window and then throw yourself out the window. And I'm like, oh boy. And I feel in my body like, I'm pretty sure you're going to go crashing through that window. That's an intrusive urge. Um, of course, obviously, I have not jumped out a window of a hotel from up high because I wouldn't be here right now. But I get that every time I go to a hotel or a tall apartment. Anything that's up high. And so it can feel like you're really going to do it. It can make you feel like you're going to yell something or say something. That happens whenever I'm somewhere that's supposed to be quiet. I feel like I'm going to yell something extremely inappropriate. And I just sit with that feeling because I've done ERP and I've learned how to allow those things to just be there. So, how ERP exposures might look, because people are like, what are you going to do for that? Like, what do you like, go stalk somebody and say, I may or may not murder you? No, of course not. That would be weird and creepy. ERP is not a scary therapy. ERP is the gold standard treatment for OCD. I have personally stayed well using only ERP for the past 20 years. Fun fact that while medication often does help a lot of people and can help reduce some of the symptoms of OCD, people who do find help with that still need to learn how to behave differently when OCD strikes. That's the key. That's the real sort of ticket to how we get better. So we learn to behave our way out of OCD. And as we do ERP, it actually makes changes in your brain and the way that you react most of the time. So I will give you an example of an exposure that we do for harm OCD. I was working with somebody who was worried. Well, this happens a lot. I've worked with a lot of people who've been worried, but a lot of people who've been worried if I'm in the kitchen near sharp objects, or if I'm using a knife or a scissors, I might suddenly lose control and, stab my whoever else lives with you, or stab myself, or cut off my fingers, or, you know, do something harmful to my pet. And so people will start avoiding, which is a compulsion. I'm not going in the kitchen, or I'm not touching knives, or I'm going to ask somebody to take all the sharp knives out of the kitchen so I don't accidentally do that. And so we might ask you as an exposure to do something like, well, what if you just stand in the kitchen near the drawer that has the knife? How about that? What if we just stand there and see what happens? And maybe you're going to feel anxious at first, and we're just going to sit. We're not going to do any compulsions, and we're going to allow the anxiety and fear to naturally pass over a few minutes. And as it does, your brain learns, hey, wait a minute, I can be near a knife drawer and not stab people. That's weird. And so then we'll start to move up from there. So we'll think, okay, well, what if you were to hold a butter knife, you know? And then what would happen, And then maybe you're nervous and you're holding a butter knife, or maybe you're nervous and you're holding a pair of scissors. And we'll say, let's just hold them and see what happens. Let's just hold them. And so getting your brain slowly but surely to learn, hey, those things you started avoiding, or those things you were so afraid would happen, turns out they don't happen. It's something called thought action fusion. People with OCD get confused about if I have a thought or an urge or an image, it means I'm going to do it. I assure you that's not true, because if it was, everybody with suicidal OCD would be dead. See? Facts. Or everybody with harm OCD at all would have harmed somebody at some point or something or some. It wouldn't make any sense. I'd throw myself out of the hotel window every time I went to a hotel. Um, and it's never happened. So, we start really, really low in terms of like, what is it that you're afraid of? Maybe you're afraid of harming your pet. So we'll say, well, what if you just pet your pet? Okay, now you're petting your pet. Now what? Oh, it turns out you can pet your pet without choking your pet. Okay, amazing. What if you hold your pet? Wow, look at that. You can hold your pet. What if you hold your pet in the kitchen? Oh my gosh. Oh, look at that. Turns out you can hold your pet while standing in a kitchen where there are knives and not stab your pet. That's amazing. So it's just really teaching your brain that the thing that it keeps freaking out about is not as scary as you thought it was. So as you move up through your fear ladder, or your hierarchy, as we call it, you get to the higher and higher things. And what you find out is, as you get to the higher and higher things, as you're conquering the smaller ones, the bigger things don't seem that big anymore. So eventually, maybe we'll get you to hold a real knife, and say, okay, I'm holding a knife. Maybe we'll have you hold a knife and say, I may or may not do something with this knife that is dangerous. And again, you're going to find out you can hold a knife and not harm yourself. A good example of that is I, for probably a solid 3 or 4 months, was getting this intrusive thought, image, and urge that I was going to, get this one, while I'm either on a live or running a live support group, was going to stab myself in the throat. Okay, this was coming up over and over and over, and I'm like, yeah, whatever. Um, and so I just started a few months ago just keeping a large knife at my desk. See, it's here. I keep it at my desk. It's real. I kept it at my desk, and after a while, I stopped caring about it, and OCD stopped caring about it. And so now, on a rare occasion, if it comes across, oh my gosh, you're gonna stab yourself, in your neck while on a live or whatever. I'm like, okay, I guess so. It's possible, but you know what? Hasn't happened yet. So I like everybody has always said, yeah, but I'm special. I'm the one who will do that thing. I'm the one. We like to call that specialness. I'm the special one. I'm the one where thought action fusion is going to happen. I'm the one who's going to pick up the knife and stab it through my dog or something like that. And yet, I bet if I asked anyone here, have you done that yet? Has that ever happened? The answer is no. But it could. But what if? But what if? OCD sounds a lot like that. What if? But what if? But what if I did? But what if I lost control? But what if I snapped? But what if? And so we give away all of our good times in our life because we're so afraid of the what ifs that OCD throws at us. And at the end of the day, in real life, having harm OCD isn't any different than having any other kind of OCD, and it doesn't make us more dangerous or more likely. Another thing that I get a lot of from people is they'll say, well, here's the problem with me. I have depression and suicidal OCD. So doesn't that make it more likely now that I'm actually going to go into crisis and harm myself? Fun fact about me. Maybe it's not fun. I have a depressive disorder and I have harm OCD. So there you go. Sometimes I feel very depressed, and I have to get through it using the tools that I've learned in therapy. And sometimes OCD is happening at the same time. And sometimes OCD says, you're depressed. So that means you want to die. And I go, okay, cool. Well, right now I'm just going to go to work. I guess we'll talk about this later because I don't have time for that right now. And I just go on with my day. Whereas before I was treated with ERP, I didn't know that. I didn't know that I could trust myself. I didn't know that this was something I could live through. So I would hide. I'm like, I'm going to hide. I'm going to not go near sharp objects. I'm not going to go near people. I'm not going to go near my animals. I'm not going. And so it's very isolating to have OCD and you're trying to protect other people. I'll tell you a little trick that I learned. OCD only goes after things you care about. So if you care about your animals, your loved ones, or yourself, OCD will attack those things. So now I take it as a confirmation of how much I care. So when OCD's like, you're going to push your daughter down the stairs, I'm like, "Aw, you know how much I love her. Thank you. Maybe I will push her. I guess we'll find out." And I move on with my day. So again, we are not looking to erase anybody's thoughts. We're not, you can't. OCD is not curable, it's manageable. If anyone has ever wasted a bunch of money on a crazy weekend workshop to solve your OCD, you know that didn't work. There is no quick fix, there's no special thing. The gold standard treatment is ERP. There is not another gold standard treatment. And there is no way around that. I mean, this is cold hard facts of over 40 years of research. You can look it up. A lot of things claim to be evidence-based and say that they're helpful, and people say that they are specialists, and that's just not always true. So there's that. Um, in a minute, or in a couple minutes, we will transition over into a Q&A section so I can answer questions. But just so you know, there is a Q&A section of Zoom next to the raise hand and next to the chat. So please put your questions into the Q&A area so that I see them and I can answer them, and you can start putting some into there. So some other examples of harm OCD, it could be something like, I'm going to make somebody sick. I'm going to contract an illness. And then I'm going to spread it to my loved ones. That is a common way that harm OCD shows up. Um, if I don't, oh, this is a fun one. This one falls under magical thinking, right? Harm will come to my loved one if I don't do this magical ritual, you know, or if I don't do this thing, something bad is going to happen and it's going to be my fault. So there are so many different ways that harm OCD shows up. We don't have to name every single one of them because if there's a way, OCD finds its way in. So just something to think about. As far as at NOCD, we have a lot of different options for people. We obviously do ERP treatment for OCD, but we start with a very thorough assessment to make sure that we know what's going on with you. And a lot of times people are afraid to come in for an assessment because they're afraid if something's going to happen, and and then what, and then what do we do? So let's see here, I'm going to open up the Q and A's. All right, hold on. Okay, here we go. And again, if you have questions, if you will put them in the Q and A as opposed to the chat. How do you just lean into harm or suicidal thoughts when you're in severe panic? Great question. So, panic does not make you more or less likely to do something like that. It just means you're anxious. It helps to understand, at least it helps most people, when you can understand, why do you feel so anxious in the first place? OCD is a false alarm that goes off in your brain that says something is wrong, something is terrible, you must find a way to neutralize or escape this danger. And Then it releases chemicals into our body that makes us ready to react. Those are the chemicals that cause all that anxiety and panic that you're talking about and fear. But I like to call it a chemical shower. It's just a chemical shower. It's not real. There's not a real emergency. So the hardest part that I have found for people with OCD to accept is that you're going to get yucky feelings and not to assign meaning to those yucky feelings. So when I am at a hotel and I'm standing by a window and it's, oh, you're gonna, throw yourself through the window, I'll get some anxiety, some discomfort, and then I'm like, okay, yeah, I know why I have the anxiety and discomfort because OCD just said I'm going to throw myself out a window. I have OCD. When your alarm goes off, you get a chemical shower. I'm having a chemical shower, and that's fine. So I can sit with the uncertainty. I don't have to go hide. I don't have to get away from the window. Actually, typically I lean on the window. I physically lean into it. I'll go, yay, I'm against the window. Oh my gosh, look at me. Maybe I'm going to fall through the window. So having anxiety doesn't make it more or less likely that you are going to do something. It's just something to think about. Um, and your brain starts to learn as you're doing those exposures and as you stop doing all those compulsions that actually you can trust the fact that you have values and OCD is going to attack your values. So, if you are terrified of harming yourself, it's probably because you don't want to harm yourself. Otherwise, you wouldn't be terrified. You would just be harming yourself. But OCD is not a logic disorder. We can't logic our way out of OCD. If you didn't have the chemical shower happen, you wouldn't care. Imagine if you just got a picture or a thought like, oh, I might harm myself. Nope, no feelings at all. You would just move on with your day. So it's part of how we have to behave as though anything's possible. Sure, yes, okay, but I'm going to go on with my day. I'm not going to react to the discomfort. And over time, your brain actually learns to come down a little bit in the intensity of the feelings and how often they're happening. All this starts to come down as you're doing your ERP. So it doesn't mean you're never going to feel it. It doesn't mean you're never going to think it, but typically most of the time it will feel less. So like when I hold this knife, I don't have any anxiety at all, even though I have thoughts. I just don't. I don't care. Some days I pick it up. Maybe I get a 2% anxiety. That's fine. In the past, I wouldn't even have touched one. So, have you ever heard of a perfectly healthy young person getting harm OCD acutely after having mono? This happened to my son and he's been battling this. Um, so kids can get OCD, sudden onset OCD um after certain illnesses like strep or different types of infections and things like that. So it really sort of depends on the age. But there is something called PANDAS. It stands for Pediatric Autoimmune Neuropsychiatric Disorders associated with streptococcal infection. There it is, PANDAS. Woo! Don't make me say it fast. But that is something that can happen to kids and teens, and actually has to get treated very specifically with certain medications. So best to go to a doctor and say, hey, can you see if my kid has PANDAS? And that is something they are able to check for and provide medication for. Most of the time, when it is PANDAS related, then you still need ERP. It doesn't mean you take medication and the OCD goes away. Most of the time, the OCD stays. unfortunately. So, but it can become a lot less intense when you get the medication to clear up the infection. All right. Honestly, the response, yes, I may be going to do it and it's going to be so fun. And then my OCD is like, whoa, that's not what I meant. Um, so that's an interesting one. I tend to lean in with humor. OCD doesn't feel funny at all. Nothing feels funny about OCD, which is why I like to break it up a little bit. So I also say things like that. And it really can be really helpful because it kind of sometimes shuts it down. Sometimes, like, so I'll say, like, whatever OCD is saying, like, I'll try to make it worse and funny at the same time. So if it's like, oh, you're going to push your daughter down the stairs, and I'm like, right, but not until right before Christmas, so I can avoid Christmas presents. I'm going to save a lot of money and I'm going to go on a vacation. So, sort of leaning into it a little bit with some humor. All right. My what if is, what if you've self-harmed in the past? I love that. Not that you've self-harmed, but I have also self-harmed. I used to self-harm, and I also had, as a teenager, real suicide attempts. So does that make it more serious now when I have, oh my gosh, what if you're going to harm yourself thoughts? Or, oh no, what if you're going to end your life? No, that's just part of my history. That's what was going on at the time. That's what the situation was. It doesn't make it any more anything. So, yep. What if is how, by the way, what if is how most OCD pops up in everybody's life. But what if? 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 What? And I say, it only what ifs the things you're worrying about. It doesn't what if everything. Like, can you imagine what ifing every possibility? What if I go outside and I get hit by a bus? What if I go outside and a cute puppy comes up to me? What if I go outside and I trip and fall? What if, what if, what if, what if, what if? We could spend our whole life what ifing. That's why a lot of what we do is focus on what is happening here in this moment. In this moment, am I harming myself? No. All right. I'll worry about it if and when it happens. So. My son is in ERP and he struggles with the idea that ERP is just ignoring the feeling or just don't check it. The philosophy is not working and I'm starting to think he's not comprehending ERP correctly. Okay, so this is a tough one. I have kids, they're all adults, but I have kids who have OCD who also sometimes struggle. One of them's doing very well, the other one struggles. You know, And it's because he's not doing ERP, by the way. Can't force anyone to do treatment that they don't want to do. That's one thing. But it's really scary, as anyone here who has OCD knows, to feel these feelings, to have these thoughts, to have these urges. And people think, what if I'm being irresponsible by not paying attention? And what I always say is, well, what about when you were paying attention and you spun out of control and you went and lost it and became a hot mess of compulsions? That didn't solve it. You can't force somebody into therapy, and you can't force people to do therapy, and you can't force people to understand therapy. And some people take longer than others to sort of come around. ERP can be a very fast therapy when you have a very willing and anxious to move forward participant. At NOCD, I treated somebody once in just a few weeks. And I was like, whoa, like, what's going on? This is a situation. Like, how did you get in and out so quickly? We also have to realize that some people there's not like levels of OCD, but have different intensities of OCD. That person had what I would call a very light light case of OCD. They had a few things that they were doing compulsively. They were like, I need to stop this. They came in, they stopped doing the things, they did the exposures, they left, they were fine. But there are people who suffer more deeply, maybe for a longer period of time. Maybe it's more distressing more often and can just feel really exhausting to come around and to get on board with doing the therapy. So, you know, you can't force anybody. So I would say, your son's just got to keep going at it. We do have at NoCD, we have support groups. Support groups can be a really good place to go. Our support groups are open to people who are doing ERP or therapy with us. And sometimes just going and hearing other people can help. I run two taboo themed support groups every week. And I see new people come in that are like, oh, how irresponsible of you not to pay attention to your OCD. Um, and then they see other people who were like, yep, I was there before, and then I fully came on board, and then I did this, and look at me, I feel a lot better. And so you sort of get a mix, and you start to go, oh, wait, okay, well, if that person can do it, I can do it. If that person is doing it, maybe it's possible, or that sounds a lot like something I've struggled with. So I do think that it can be helpful. But what you can't do is force it down anybody's throat. Some people are going to compulse until they're ready. So yeah, I hope your son comes around. But like people are always shocked. They're like, "You have a child who is not treated?" And I'm like, yes, my child is old and is not a child. They're an adult and they don't have to go if they don't want to. So when their OCD is really flaring up, I'm like, hey, there's ERP. If you want it, I will send you to NOCD, which is all we can do. Another thing we can do is we don't have to accommodate. If you are accommodating, I would take that away. Um, if you're making OCD friendly at home. So that's part of it sometimes. All right. I didn't know that pedophilic OCD was the thing. I worry about it because I work with children. What can I do ERP wise? Oh, we treat that at NoCD all the time. Pedophilic OCD is a thing. It's just like everything. What if I? What if I? So the fact that you work with children means you like to work with children. And unfortunately, you have OCD. So OCD is coming after, oh, well, aren't you dangerous working with children? It's because you care about it. I also work with children. I specialize in treating children, actually. Um, Small children, teenagers, all ages of children. And I've had similar thoughts that I'm going to do something, whatever it is, some harmful thing to kids. And I just know that I never have. It doesn't follow my values. OCD goes against your values. So if it's saying you're going to hurt people you work with, you're not. So there is that. But yeah, you can come in and get some ERP therapy. We talk about pedophilic OCD in my groups every week. We talk about suicidal and homicidal OCD. We talk about all of it. I've been avoiding calling my grandma. I feel like if I call her, she will die that night. So that would fall under magical thinking and also harm, right? What if I call my grandma and she dies? What if you don't call her? Imagine you never called your grandmother again. Will that keep her alive forever? Obviously not, unless she is a vampire or a zombie. I don't know who lives forever, whoever it is that lives forever. And so you know that's not logical, right? Your grandma's life is not on the line based on whether or not you call. But I used to have similar thoughts like that. I'm very close, was very close to my grandmother. She was like my dearest person to me. So I used to always worry about her dying through various things. And I had all these magical things that I thought. And you know what? She died of natural causes. So not because I was keeping her alive through all my magical things. That didn't work. She died because she got old and she died. So um obviously, so like if you were somebody's if you were my client at an OCD and I was doing therapy with you, I'd be like, call your grandma and find out. If you don't call her, eventually she is not going to be alive, and then you'll be sad you didn't call her and you're missing out because of your OCD is making you afraid to call. Do you know the gold standard of medication? That is a great question. So if you go to the IOCDF, International OCD Foundation website, they have a section on medications, and they have both a pediatric medication and adult medications, and it gives there what the standard OCD medications are and at what doses. I am not a medication prescriber, so I cannot give medication advice. That being said, never ask anyone else what they're taking because everybody has different genetics, everybody has different everything. So medications that work for some people won't work for others. I'm not on any medications because medications did not work for me. I went through all the medications. I just use ERP because I don't have another option. So just something to think about. That being said, medication can be very helpful to those who it helps. My harm OCD presents as an intrusive image, not really a thought. I don't worry I'm going to do it or avoid people. I have images about it. Have you seen this before? Yes, I was just sharing this the other day, actually. So I don't know why. Typically, my suicidal OCD has to do with me throwing myself off of high places, or like I said, stabbing myself in the throat recently. But in the past couple of weeks, it's just intrusive images of me hanging from trees. I live in the forest. I look outside, I'm looking at trees, and all I can imagine are these images of me hanging. Oh, that's a hanging tree. That is not a good hanging tree. That would be a good. And I just see all these images of myself. So yes, you can get intrusive images. I'm not fearing that I'm going to go do that either. I just have intrusive images of it. And obviously that's not very pleasant, but I just go, yep, could be. And I just sort of move on with my day, and try to enjoy the forest for what it is. Tips for just accepting the presence of intrusive thoughts. Went through a few years with no symptoms, find myself longing for those days. Well, I will start with saying you're very lucky that you went for a few years with no symptoms. A lot of people are able to have sort of these little remission periods. I don't know what you would call it, but most people don't. Most people have it, on a pretty regular basis. I'm somebody who never goes, I don't have a single hour that goes by without an intrusive thought or image. I haven't, as long as I can remember. I mean, for sure since I was 10. Always. I just always have it. And the important thing is not saying days where my OCD is more present are bad days and days without it are good days. I've noticed a lot of people will do that. What a terrible day I'm having. No, it's not a bad day. There's no bad days or good days. They're all just days, and we have OCD and we just show up, and that's it. So we don't have to accept the presence of the intrusive thoughts. They're going to be there whether we accept them or not. Just like we don't have to accept that we have OCD, but if you have it, you have it, right? And so just like sometimes people say, well, how am I supposed to accept uncertainty? You don't have to accept uncertainty, but uncertainty exists in most things in life. So that's what it is. So you just have to deal with it. So I sit with the possibility. Sure, I can throw myself out a window. That's easy. I just haven't done it. It's not what I want to do today. What would be examples of exposures for false memories surrounding I may have harmed somebody, I just don't remember? Well, the most important thing is the response prevention for that. So everybody might have done something and not remember. It's the trying to remember that creates false memories. The more you try to remember if something happened, your brain starts to fill in blanks with things that aren't necessarily true, and you just freak yourself out. So what you do is you sit with, maybe I did, maybe I didn't do something, but right now I'm just going to go on with today. Maybe I've done things, I don't know. It's possible. But unless the FBI or police or whoever comes to your door comes and says, hey, I here's a video of you doing harmful things in a wherever and 4 years ago. I'm not going to worry about it until then. So the most important thing you can do is stop trying to figure it out. Say, yep, maybe that's possible, and leave it there. Can harm OCD also be that you think you could give someone food poisoning if you undercook food or if you touch raw meat with a spoon and use it to stir something? Yep, exactly. I get that. I do that all the time, actually. I'm like, oh no, did my hand touch the chicken? And then after that, did I wash my hands? I don't know if I touched maybe I just touched the lettuce for the salad and now everybody's gonna get sick. I'm like, yeah, it could be. I guess so. I guess we'll find out. It's all about not trying to figure it out, whatever it is, because it is not solvable. I mean, obviously, if you have like a raw thing in front of you and you go, bam, bam, and you start touching things, then you're very well aware that that's happening. But yeah, I get that. Especially if I invite people over. I'm like, oh, if I host like a Thanksgiving or something, I'm like, what if everybody gets food poisoning and they'll know it was for me? Well, then that sucks. Also, I have chickens and I have eggs because I have chickens. And so sometimes I will give eggs away to various neighbors and various people. And I think, oh, I get the intrusive thought, what if one of the eggs was like not good in some way? It was like spoiled and like they get really sick and they blame you. And I'm like, amazing. Until it happens, I'm not going to worry about it. Sometimes when I don't panic, I get scared, I will act on the thoughts. I have a hard time being comfortable with the thoughts. Okay. What if you didn't have to be comfortable with the thoughts? Being in panic doesn't make you feel any better about intrusive thoughts, right? Um, this is a very, like, people start to get nervous sometimes as they start to get better and the thoughts are less distressing and they're like, oh no, I'm not worrying about those images and thoughts anymore. Does that mean now it's harmful or I like that or I'm going to do it? No, it just means you're doing good ERP. These thoughts don't distress me much at all anymore, a little bit every once in a while, but I'm like, eh. Um, acting on thoughts is not how it works. That's again thought action fusion. And whether or not you're panicking doesn't make thought action fusion more or less real. How can you quickly break cycle of the record player, harm OCD, intrusive thoughts when you feel like you automatically leaning into them? So we're not going to break the cycle of them playing. We just leave it there. So I don't try, I don't try to think about harm thoughts all day. They just happen. And I'm not trying to escape them. We can't escape them. And it doesn't matter if you lean into them. It doesn't matter if you lean in, lean out, make a joke. The most important thing is that you're not compulsing about them, but you cannot control your thoughts. If I could control my thoughts, I would choose to have different thoughts. I wouldn't like to have OCD thoughts and images all day, every day into the night. I would prefer to have other thoughts. It's not a choice. So we just learn how radically to accept that this is our reality. It doesn't have to be distressing. You go through your ERP therapy and you learn that those thoughts don't have to be distressing. That's the difference. What about when OCD says those who are injured, don't share, or died can't speak for themselves, so it's not shared? And if they died, so don't trust evidence so easily. Well, that's just a very complicated rumination on harm, isn't it? Well, what do we know about science and things of that nature? Back in the day, it was pretty easy to get away with things because they didn't have a lot of the evidence tools they have these days. But these days, people will find it. If something happened and somebody died, and we don't remember killing them or whatever it is that we're worried about, and okay, well, then go on with your life. And if somebody shows up at your door and says, I have evidence here that shows that you murdered this person, deal with it if and when it happens. OCD is always trying to get us to panic now about things that are not happening. I always say, wait and see if it happens and react at that time. I use ERP every day. I sit by the window in my home, but I still get these thoughts every day. Am I doing something wrong? No, you're doing something right. So sitting by the window while getting the thoughts about throwing yourself out the window are not going to make the thoughts go away. The treatment for OCD teaches us how to live alongside OCD, not get rid of it. OCD is not get rid of, we can't get rid of it. That's what I'm trying to say. So if every time I go to a hotel, I'm going to always pick a high floor because it's my value to have a high floor. And I know when I get there, it's going to say you're going to throw yourself out the window. And I just go, yep, and it's going to be amazing because it's a nice, cool evening. And I just go on about my day. So we're not trying to get rid of thoughts. We can't. We cannot get rid of OCD. OCD is a broken alarm that goes off for no reason, and we can't stop that. We can help ourselves not care so much about it. My what if is, what if you have actually self-harmed in the past? Is there more validity to the OCD self-harm thoughts? The answer is no. I have definitely self-harmed, 100% certainty. I know this. I can tell you exactly what I did. I know what I did. I remember what I did. I know how long I did it for. And it does not make, now when OCD says you might self-harm, it doesn't make it more likely. Wouldn't matter if I remembered, if I didn't remember, if I really did it, if I didn't. There's no factors that then make OCD more likely to be real. OCD is not real. It's a broken alarm system that tells us stuff that is not real. And then we worry about it and then we start compulsing. What about harm compulsions? Is it different at all? Mine's usually pinching or digging my nails in. So you choose, that's a behavioral choice, right? It's like, I'm going to pinch myself or dig my nails in. Um, if you're doing that as a compulsion, it's a behavior. So you can also choose to not do that. And that's something that I would work on with a therapist. If you're like, oh gosh, I'm having thoughts and therefore I have to do this thing. Well, you don't have to do that. So definitely something. How do I know what is OCD, what is not OCD? If these feelings and instincts feel so natural to me, how do I differentiate real life guilt versus OCD? I really want to start doing more intense and consistent exposures. So the goal here is not to figure out what is a feeling, is it real, is it not real, should I feel guilty, is this OCD? It's to not figure it out. That's when we talk about uncertainty. We don't say, I'm uncertain whether or not I'm a murderer or a pedophile. That's not what we're saying. You sit in the uncertainty, not trying to figure it out. So don't try to figure out, is it a feeling? Is it an instinct? Is it natural? Is it not natural? Is it real? Is it not real? That's how you get caught in a rumination cycle. You just say, I don't know what it is, and I really don't care. I'm just going to leave it there. What if you are 81 years old, no job, never married, no children, misdiagnosed your whole life? How can I move on with my day when I have nothing to move on to, nowhere to go? Well, I will say this. First of all, we have had people at OCD get treated in their 80s. Um, when we say move on with your day, it doesn't mean that you have to move on to a job or an activity or all we're saying is don't sit around and just engage in your OCD. Do something values based instead. What would you rather be doing? Would you rather be reading? Would you rather be going on a walk? Would you rather go outside? Would you rather watch a movie? Would you rather do anything other than sit around compulsing or ruminating um, in your head? So that's what it is. We can't physically, even if we physically go to a different location, our OCD goes with us. It's in our brain. So going to a different area doesn't change that for us. Does the fear that you will break things either accidentally or deliberately fall under harm OCD? I avoid touching anything on planes for fear the plane will crash. So I deliberately loosen a bolt or pulled a wire, and a mishap will be my fault. Yep, it's responsibility for harm. I get all that when I go on a plane. Can you imagine if planes were being held together by like one small screw that you touch and like the whole plane falls apart. I wouldn't fly if planes were that ridiculous. Number one. I always get the intrusive urge and image that I'm going to undo the exit door, the emergency exit, and jump out. And then of course everyone dies with me. And so sometimes on purpose, as an exposure, I select the exit door seating. That is my exposure. You're on a flight next to the exit door. Sometimes I'll touch it. Touching the exit door. Touching the exit door. Can OCD be cured? No, it cannot, but it can be managed with ERP therapy. How do you let go of feeling guilt about your obsessions? You know, if we were responsible for the content of our OCD, we might be justified in feeling bad, but we're not. When's the last time you said to somebody who has depression, you should feel bad? You're really wrecking the mood around here, you know? Or would you say to me, because I have OCD and I have all this stuff, that I should feel guilty for having thoughts of harm toward my family or my pets? I would say no. I have a lot of self-compassion for myself. I have compassion for you and for everybody who suffers from any mental illness. Shame doesn't go into it and guilt shouldn't go into it. There's an excellent workbook by Kimberly Quinlan called the Self-Compassion with OCD Workbook, and it addresses that. And we also address it at NOCD as part of your therapy. Got to have self-compassion. We're almost ready to close, but this is what I will do. I'm going to answer another question. And then what we will do is have a part 2 that we release where I answer all the rest of the questions that I didn't have a chance to get to. All right. When I am less anxious over my thoughts and ignore them, I get pulled back in the cycle because I get thoughts like, shouldn't you be more worried? So getting pulled back into the cycle is just you listening to what's being said and then you choosing to go back into it. So when you're less anxious about intrusive thoughts, that just means you're doing really good therapy. So should I be worried that I have a knife next to me because I get thoughts about it? No, of course not. Of course not. I'm still just a person with a knife who happens to have OCD, intrusive thoughts. Did you have certain mantras that got you through uncertainty? Not mantras that would feed your toxic OCD cycle, but that would help you move forward and be present. Yes, a couple of things. One, this is not mine, this is somebody else's, but yesterday is history, tomorrow is a mystery. So that keeps you in the present moment, right? I can't know what happened before and I can't know what's going to happen in the future. So I'm just going to focus on right now. The thing that I do that I love, this is my thing that I always tell people. Is this happening right now? This thing, whatever this thing you're worried about, is it happening right now in this second? If not, move on and do a values-based activity instead. So, will I harm my dog? I don't know. Is your dog harmed? No? Worry about it later. What would I rather be doing instead? Oh, is your daughter pushed down the stairs? No? Okay, what can I be doing? I can be right here instead, and I can be running a workshop on harm OCD. See? So that's what I would recommend. I really want to thank everybody, by the way, for coming tonight and for taking time to join us. And I just really, really cannot say enough. If you are struggling with OCD, please reach out, schedule a call with NOCD. You can learn more. You can talk to us for free to find out how we can help. You can schedule a call with our care team. You can go to nocd.com and you can click right on there and get yourself a free consultation. We take a wide variety of insurances. We have payment plans. We have a lot of options. And I hope that everybody has a really good mental health awareness month and that you get to the right treatment. Nice seeing you all.